Mr. President, I would like to start my remarks with my deepest condolences and prayers for the people of Las Vegas and to the families and loved ones of the victims of this, the worst mass shooting in our nation's history. The nation's heart breaks that innocent concertgoers had to suffer such senseless violence. May you find the strength and the love to overcome your grief, to heal, and to move forward. And we owe our gratitude to the brave first responders for their efforts last night, and to the medical professionals who are working tirelessly to heal wounds and save lives right now. But enough is enough. Americans are tired of living in fear that their community will be the next Newtown or Aurora, Orlando, or Las Vegas. We must act so that we do not become numb to this preventable carnage. This epidemic of gun violence in our country is not preordained, it is preventable. We can begin by banning these military-style assault weapons like the AR-15, which are the guns of choice for those who seek to inflict mass casualties on civilians. These are weapons that belong in combat, not in our communities. Unfortunately, the gun lobby prevailed on Congress to let the assault weapons ban expire in 2004, but we need it now more than ever. We must also pass legislation to ensure that all purchases include a background check. 92% of Americans support expanded background checks. 92% of Americans support expanded background checks. No one should be able to purchase a gun through Facebook or Instagram without a background check. Instagram should not be Insta-gun, which it is in America today. Let's also close the gun show loophole that allows anyone to go into one of these Kmarts full of killing machines and buy a gun without a background check. Let's close the loophole that allows domestic abusers to buy guns. Let's close the loophole that allows straw purchasers to buy guns and flood our streets with them. Let's repeal the Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Act, PLACA, and take away the gun manufacturer's immunity from civil liability. PLCAA should stand for Protecting Lives, Creating Arms Accountability. We must also recognize that this epidemic of gun violence is a public health emergency, and it must treat it that way. We must fully fund this critical research agenda at the Centers for Disease Control and give the CDC the resources that it needs. You will hear lots of people say that now is not the time to politicize this tragedy, that talking about legislation is insensitive and wrong. The only thing the NRA wants more than to sell lots of gun silencers is to put a silencer on the debate about gun safety legislation. The only thing the NRA wants more than allowing nationwide concealed carry laws is to conceal the overwhelming support for background checks. The only thing the NRA wants more than to stifle smart gun technology is to stifle debate on gun violence protection. So to anyone who says this debate now is too soon, it's already too late for at least 58 people in Las Vegas and hundreds of others who were wounded. We should not wait another day. We need to pass common sense gun safety legislation so that we can hold a moment of silence for the NRA's stranglehold on American politics. We must make NRA stand for not relevant anymore in American politics in our country. That should be our agenda here on the floor of the United States Senate. What is wrong is leaving Americans and our communities unprotected, yet again, from gun violence. What is wrong is not having a debate and allowing the NRA to block sensible gun safety legislation. We must act so that we do not become numb to the preventable carnage. For the people of Las Vegas, the people of Newtown, Aurora, San Bernardino, and every community in our country. That should be our responsibility now in this country. Mr. President, I would also like to turn my attention to the confirmation of FCC Chairman Ajit Pai, the subject of today's vote out here on the Senate floor. Last week, I took to the floor to explain how, in his short tenure as chairman of the Federal Communications Commission, Ajit Pai has stood up for big corporations and ignored American consumers. Under Ajit Pai, the FCC now stands for Forgetting Consumers and Competition. And here are the 5 reasons I gave. Number 1, on net neutrality, I explained how Ajit Pai wants to take a weed whacker, his words, to net neutrality, allowing broadband providers to serve as internet gatekeepers and pick online winners and losers. Number 2, on privacy. Chairman Pai has actively supported efforts to allow broadband providers to sell consumers sensitive information without their consent, and eliminating requirements for those companies to put in place data security protections despite the obvious need to protect personal information. 3, on mega mergers. Mr. Pai has paved the way for massive mergers, which will squeeze out independent programmers and lead to higher prices for consumers. 4, the E-rate, the education rate. Chairman Pai has refused to commit to protecting the E-rate, the most successful educational technology program in our country's history, which links up schools and libraries to the internet. And 5, the Lifeline program. Mr. Pai has undercut the Lifeline program, which provides access to voice and internet service for millions of low-income Americans. The case against Chairman Pai's nomination is clear. But I want to spend a few more minutes today on the particularly critical issue of net neutrality, the chief governing principle of the internet. Net neutrality ensures that all internet traffic is treated equal, requiring that internet service providers like AT&T, Charter, Verizon, and Comcast do not block, slow down, censor, or prioritize internet traffic. Today, essentially every company is an internet company. Every company has to deal with the digital revolution to be relevant in the 21st century. In 2016, almost half of the venture capital funds invested in this country went towards internet-specific and software companies. That's $25 billion worth of investment, half of all venture capital in this country. That's good. And to meet America's insatiable demand for broadband internet, U.S. broadband companies, telecommunications industry, the big companies invested more than $87 billion in capital expenditures in 2015. That's the highest rate of annual investment in the last 10 years. That's good. So we've hit the sweet spot. Investment in broadband and wireless technologies is very high. Job creation, very high. Venture capital investment in online startups is very high. And with net neutrality rules in place, the best ideas, not merely the best funded ideas, can thrive in the 21st century. Now, Chairman Pai says that he, quote, likes net neutrality. But then he says he wants to take an axe to the very order that established today's net neutrality rules. That's like saying you value democracy but don't really like the Constitution. It makes no sense. Net neutrality is the organizing principle of the internet. Chairman Pai and the ISPs, that's internet service providers, the big companies, keep walking around whispering how Title II is some terrible word, some terrible thing. But let's understand how we landed here. What is Title II? It gets all very mysterious until you put it into very simple language. In 2010, the Federal Communications Commission attempted to put net neutrality rules in place without reclassifying broadband under Title II of the Communications Act. The District of Columbia Circuit Court proceeded to invalidate those rules and said to the Federal Communications Commission, here's how you can do it, and it will not be struck down. Here's a smart way for you to put net neutrality on the books that makes it legal. So the Federal Communications Commission, in correctly reading the court decision, went back and in 2015 adopted the open Internet Order, which reclassified broadband as a telecommunications service under Title II, under this ability to regulate. And they did it. And the Circuit Court of Appeals upheld the rules in a 2016 decision. So there it is. Instructed by the court how to do it, follow the instructions, implement, done. It is now baked into the personality of the internet to have openness. The apertures are there for anyone to be able to get on, not to be discriminated against. That's what the internet should be like in the 21st century. And Title II is appropriate because it was Congress's intent to preserve the FCC's authority to forestall threats to competition and innovation in telecommunications services, even as those technologies used to offer those services evolve over time. We're not locked in one period of technology. As it evolves, so too does an evolution occur in terms of what openness means, what an ability for everyone to be able to use the internet without being discriminated against. Broadband has become the single most important telecommunications service Americans use to transmit information to one another, and it has become clear that innovators, businesses, and consumers overwhelmingly view broadband as a telecommunications service. This is common sense to Americans around the country, with the only exception being big telecommunications lobbyists and lawyers who work to close this internet, who want to stop this incredible entrepreneurial, democracy-enhancing set of rules that exist to ensure that this communications mechanism is not controlled by just a small number of companies. And now Ajit Pai has said that he likes net neutrality, but that he thinks it should be voluntary. But voluntary regulations won't work. We know that the broadband industry, your cable, your wireless, your telecommunications provider, cannot regulate themselves. They struggle to even show up on time to install or fix your service. Do we really trust the broadband industry to resist leveraging their internet gatekeeper role and putting their online competitors at an unfair disadvantage? Of course not. Americans have made their voices heard about net neutrality. More than 22 million Americans have written to the Federal Communications Commission in the past several months, sending a clear message of support for net neutrality. Hear that again. 22 million Americans sent a message to the Federal Communications Commission that they do not want to see a change in the net neutrality rules for our country. And yet, Ajit Pai will not listen. His plan will allow broadband providers to stifle innovation, stifle entrepreneurship. His plan will allow big broadband barons to crush competition, reduce choice, and then make consumers pay more. We cannot allow this to happen. That is why this vote we're about to take is so important. And that's why I urge my colleagues to stand up for consumers and to vote no on Ajit Pai's nomination to be the chairman of the Federal Communications Commission. Mr. President, I yield back the balance of my time, and I doubt the presence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.